Hey y'all, welcome to another interview from The Mind of a Skeptical Leftist. This time around I talked to May from the YouTube channel Peace Labor May, and I don't have much to say except to tell you to make sure to check out her channel because this was a fun chat, a good chat, and her content is awesome. I'm not a poet at all, but I enjoy a lot of her poetry, and I think I'm really enjoying discovering liberatory poetry and fiction that has been coming out of leftist spaces, and Peace Labor May is a great channel with some of that content. Before I get into the actual interview, I want to talk a little bit about an article I recently read. It was in the New York Times, which I normally avoid, but this title caught my attention. It was titled, "The Right's Big Lie About a Sexual Assault in Virginia." So, and I heard about this a while ago when right-wingers on Facebook and Twitter were talking about a case of rape in a high school bathroom by someone using a trans-inclusive policy to gain entrance to the bathroom, to the girls' bathroom. Now, I understand that this is this is the kind of thing that is on my red flags for obvious bullshit, but I thought I would take a shot and Google it anyway. And I found a bunch of articles that shared the same facts and the same narrative and were using the same rhetoric about it. And they were always combining a story of a girl who was being raped, and they added, they were combining it with the inclusive, trans-inclusive policy of the school, and framing it as though this person was trans and was using this as an opportunity to rape someone in the bathroom. The stereotypical scaremongering idea, this fit the exact thing that they try to portray all the time. And obviously, even if one person did this thing one time, that is not a justification for the exclusion of trans people from any rights to use the washroom of their gender. There's no reason to connect this one person to the broader trans community. There's no reason for any of that, even if the facts on the ground were exactly as described in various articles. But it turns out that that's not how it was anyway. The guy who did the raping wasn't trans at all, was a cis guy, and didn't use a trans inclusion as a purpose, as a way of getting into the girls' washroom, because that wasn't a policy when the rape happened. It didn't become a policy till after this happened. So, and apparently the guy was the ex-boyfriend of the girl that he raped, and she wanted to talk to him about something, so they went to a specific room, a bathroom that they could have some privacy in and have a conversation. And he took that as an opportunity to rape her. Of course, this won't make it into the right-wing media sphere. And even if it did, they would still try to twist it up to gain, again, to try and keep trans women from using the washroom that they identify with. The washroom that matches their gender, even if if they can twist it, they will. So this is, I hate to say it, but this is a case of the culture war narrative coming from a white right-wing media sphere and distorting facts so that they could play up a fear that they created in order to frame their bigoted views as protecting women. And this is, I think, an example of why we on the left cannot pretend that issues like trans inclusion or bigotry against the LGBTQ community is a fringe issue that we shouldn't worry about while we focus on class. We absolutely need to beat TERFs and right-wing lies and all that reactionary fascist bullshit wherever we see it, because they are in our way. Our enemies are many, and those they oppress are our comrades. That is how this has to work. But, okay, I'm not a fan of the New York Times, but I will include a link to the article in the show notes for this episode in case you want to read more on that. But I want to emphasize how important it is that we take trans liberation, LGBTQ liberation seriously when we're talking about the issues that we want to address in society. Yes, class is a major issue, but so is racism, so is feminism. These are major things that we need to be on board with. And LGBTQ liberation is no different than those. I mean, I guess people who listen to this probably understand my perspective already. I believe that the intersection of class and other forms of oppression is all tied together. And I think that we can and ought to deal with all of them as much as we can. Obviously, certain people are going to have focuses more in line with their particular struggle. But I think as on the left, we need to make sure that we're supporting our trans comrades. So I think that's everything I got to say about that. It's just, I saw this article, I read this, it's a short read. It's just a quick opinion piece about how the right has distorted this case and how none of the facts actually line up to what they've said in the Daily Wire or Fox or any of these other sources that you might find. And so I guess with that, if you like what I do, then make sure to subscribe, share, like, and all that stuff. And if you think my work is valuable and want to support it financially, then you can do that at patreon.com/skepticalleftist or buymeacoffee.com/skepticallefty. Those links are in my Linktree along with all my other stuff, but you'll hear about that again at the end of the episode. So now I'm going to send you to the interview. Thanks. Hi, and welcome to The Mind of the Skeptical Leftist, the podcast where I talk to a variety of people to promote critical thinking, progressive politics, and left-wing philosophy. And today I'm joined by May of the YouTube channel Peace Labor May. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess, first things first, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself and your background?
Okay, so I am from Kazakhstan, from Almaty, which used to be our capital. And I've had this channel for a year now. And I'm a little bit nervous because I've never had an interview.
Oh, no worries.
And with all the Zoom experience I had last year, I still can't use any of the equipment. So if the sound's off, my apologies. But yeah, I have been studying Marxism-Leninism for the past 6 months with the focus on Lenin, whose name I'm going to pronounce in Russian because Russian is my mother language, and I do speak Russian. Okay, I just said that twice. Okay, so yeah, and my videos do focus a lot on mental health and the effect capitalism has on us as individuals. And I don't delve too deep into theory because I think it should be accessible to everyone, and we all should be able to learn about theory at our own pace. And I think there is a lot of ableism that we have to overcome as a community. And I also touch upon some feminist topics because I believe that a feminist movement is crucial to any leftist movement, and we have to make sure that we include everyone, and obviously marginalized people as well. So I probably can consider myself marginalized because I'm from a part of the world nobody ever hears about. So, but I'm not an expert on Kazakhstan, so I know a lot of folks have a lot of questions about Kazakhstan. I do have quite a unique view because I'm a third culture kid, so obviously I live here, so I can report on what's happening, but my perspective is definitely going to be somewhat different from some other folks from here.
Right. Yeah, like I actually don't know enough about Kazakhstan to even ask about it.
yeah, it's very common. Yeah. We here in Almaty, we live in a region that's surrounded by mountains, and our mountains are quite famous. It is actually, and we're right on the border with China. So we share the mountain range. It is the Tian Shan mountain range. And people do come to visit, to hike, and there are a lot of mountain activities here. But most of Kazakhstan, Kazakhstan is a pretty large place, and we do have a lot of steppes, and we are a landlocked country. So these are a couple of facts I know.
I live in Saskatchewan in Canada. So I understand about being landlocked, but we don't have mountains here.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
just wide open spaces. So I guess you mentioned you've been studying Marxism and Leninism for a while. Do you identify as a Marxist-Leninist then?
Yes, even though I don't necessarily find these labels to be necessary, it doesn't really matter. It's
Right.
just I just happen to find out that these are the values that I line up the most with, and because I do primarily focus my studying on Marx, Engels, and Lenin, it seems like they are influencing me the most.
Right.
Yeah, and there is a little bit of I feel like there is a little bit of a stigma attached to being a Marxist-Leninist. I actually learned fairly recently through social media that this might be something controversial. So this is why in one of my videos where I introduce myself, I do mention in the title that I'm a leftist, so that it's a little bit more welcoming to a variety of people.
Yeah, that's like I identify as like an anarcho-communist. That's kind of the label I picked. And but yeah, like I one of my best friends is a Marxist-Leninist. I know people who are Trotskyists or whatever. Everybody attaches different labels to themselves, right? And as long as we can all, agree that capitalism is bad and that we got to keep moving, try and change things.
Yeah. So if you're an anarcho-communist, do you read Kropotkin at all?
I do. I have read The Conquest of Bread and the other one, Mutual Aid or Mutualism.
As a Factor of Evolution. Yeah. Yeah, so, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. And I these days I'm reading like a book that just came out a few years ago. It's called The Anarchist Turn. So it's kind of trying to put anarchism into like hey, this is a project we can actually achieve in the modern era. So it's really interesting. But
yeah, I'm going to add it to my reading list because it keeps getting expanded, and I don't think I'll have enough time to read it all.
Yeah,
but I'm curious.
Yeah, I have about 15 minutes every 2 weeks that I get to read.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I listen to a lot of podcasts, so I try to listen to a lot of audiobooks too. But
I see.
So one thing I did want to ask you about is because you speak Russian, it's your first language. What made you decide to do your videos in English?
Well, I work in English, so I mean, and I shouldn't put it in air quotes because I actually literally do. So I have much more experience speaking publicly in English, and I do kind of have this vague plan of starting to make content in Russian as well, but I'm a little bit intimidated. My Russian is great, but I'm kind of not used. I obviously talk to my family, to my friends in Russian, but yeah. And also, I think that the audience obviously is larger if you speak English, and yeah, it's many factors why. But yeah, I would go English. I do think in 2 languages, so English was kind of a no-brainer for me to pick.
Right. Yeah, I suppose that makes sense. I recently listened to an episode of the Coffee with Comrades podcast, and they had like a French anarchist was part of the episode. Was an interview with the French anarchist, and it's interesting to think like the various dynamics, like that. Like English is such a dominant language in North America, and I'm so used to it that often when I hear somebody speaking another language, I think, well, I wonder what the political sphere is like in that region or that area. Are there a lot of Marxists in Kazakhstan?
I don't think so. Yeah. Well, again, my perspective is going to be very limited. But as far as I know, the organizations we have here, they are not very well versed in what they're doing. Unfortunately, there is one movement that may be promising. They are socialists, and they appear to have the liberation of the working class in mind. So this is one of the organizations where I think I don't think they read Lenin, because they don't really refer to much of what he's saying in their writing. And apart from that, as for the population, I would say there is a lot of imperialist propaganda that is thriving, and people do repeat, talking points that it appears like the CIA has provided. So it's really bizarre to see when people here who actually were born in Soviet Union and lived in Soviet Union, they start repeating some of the lies that used to be spread. I mean, the Cold War is ongoing, but the Cold War propaganda, and it's upsetting because a lot of people, I think that the vast majority of people here benefited from what's been happening here, and from the Soviet Union. Much of what we have here, the infrastructure, is all Soviet, and the apartment I live in was built in the Soviet during that time, and pretty much everything. And that is not to say that that this is their sole achievement. However, it is, to me, it's really strange when people kind of spit on their own history and say, oh, it was all ultimately bad and we should forget it, which is, I think we should study or
doesn't seem necessarily accurate.
Yeah.
We just covered a book by Michael Parenti for the we do book reviews on the show as well. My buddy Justin, he reads a lot, so we covered Michael Parenti's black shirts and red. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we went through a lot of the stuff, like the misinformation about the Soviet Union and like when I grew up, I was taught that Joseph Stalin killed like 10 million people basically on his own.
Yeah.
Like he basically just decided to do it.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, once you start examining that and learning the history, it becomes pretty obvious that that's not what happened. But again, I'm not a Stalin apologist. I just I like to have the facts, right? So one of the things I really liked about your channel is like you add poetry into your videos. Where do you get the inspiration for that?
Yeah, poetry has been a huge part of my life for forever. So, and I've been using poetry as a therapeutic medium, and also definitely I was inspired by many of the Russian poets, such as Mayakovsky, who was a revolutionary poet and whose poetry is amazing. I'm not sure how he sounds in translation, probably not as good as in Russian, but I was hugely inspired by Mayakovsky's, and obviously, again, in English, it's going to sound quite different. So probably the influence is not going to be as obvious now. And here in Kazakhstan, the people, and obviously Kazakhs are not a homogenous group. There were lots of various groups, and but the culture was shared, as far as I know. From what I studied, but there's been a huge culture of poetry here in these lands as well, and people would sing, and they would have these what I refer to as rap battles, where two poets who were called akins, they would kind of fight each other with words and just spontaneously create these songs, and they play that instrument, that string instrument that's called tambra. And it is, I mean, kind of like a banjo, I guess, or a guitar of sorts, which is a traditional instrument. And so reportedly, people of Kazakhstan have been very much into poetry and songwriting since the dawn of time. So maybe I've inherited some of that as well.
That's cool. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I didn't know that that about like rap battles, I guess. Like, I suppose it
I
makes
told them
sense.
that obviously they weren't. It's
Right.
just that when you read the text, they are trying to insult each other, but in a way that would be a little bit more. I mean, they couldn't right out insult each other, but they try to. So they try to
Right.
outsmart and outwit each other. And it would be kind of a big deal when famous icons did that. Yeah, I think the tradition kind of continues, but I've never watched or listened to one. I should probably do that.
That's really neat. I think that's worth looking into. Yeah, for sure. So, one of the other things about your videos is that you talk about some an addiction you had to shopping. How I wonder, like, about your analysis of that through an anti-capitalist lens.
Yeah, actually, this is what led me to anti-capitalism to begin with, because I was seeing just how much damage this can bring, and realizing that this isn't just about me. This is obviously, I take responsibility for what I did and for the addiction. However, after analyzing the circumstances, I realized that the conditions were created to stimulate people to overindulge in certain activities, and
Right.
obviously shopping. And shopping is underrated. I think people think it's kind of innocuous, it's not a big deal. Oh, women do that, etc., etc. So it is a stereotype that should absolutely die. It is not normal for anyone to want to shop excessively, and it usually points to a bigger problem. And obviously, it varies from person to person, and there is no rule of thumb to understand whether someone's shopping patterns are an addiction or not. And it's best to examine it with a professional. But in my case, I was able to see that I was using shopping as a coping mechanism. It was maladaptive, and I couldn't just stop because, this is what people often say, just stop. And
Right.
I realized that I was doing a lot of mental gymnastics to justify my purchases. And this is when I got scared, and I thought, well, I don't think that is normal. As I kept looking into it, I slowly realized that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. And what about the production as well? So, and even with little stories like Ursula Le Guin's Those Who Walk Away from Homeless, I think this is what the story is called. They teach it at schools, I believe. And I have a little video about it as well. We all kind of are tied in this vicious cycle where we cannot sustainably produce and consume goods. And what can we do? So when I started looking into solutions, I realized that this whole, the world was not running the way it should. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're definitely spot on there when you say that the way that things are set up is to feed like a kind of a overconsumption, right? Like everything, how many ads on Facebook do I see every day for things that I consciously want and I probably talked about, but why do I need 60 ads for headphones? Like it doesn't make any sense except through the capitalist lens, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so did you actually end up seeing like a professional for that, or did you just manage to work your way through this through the anti-capitalism?
Yeah, I had to manage it on my own. Unfortunately, I didn't have access to a professional at the time. And it is an ongoing battle. I still often would resort to shopping, and I've developed certain tricks not to do it in a manner that would be destructive. So it's not because I have to buy things in order to live. Right. So I do have to continuously watch over myself. And as far as I know, from what I've read in the past, shopping addictions may be the hardest to treat just because you cannot cold turkey stop buying.
Right.
I mean, obviously, maybe your family can shop for you, but it is pretty difficult. So
Yeah,
you're
not
kind of
everybody's going to
stuck in
have
here.
that, right?
Right. And also, so you kind of have to continuously question yourself and your motivation. Like, do I actually need this? And so obviously journaling, making lists and doing, all that making lifestyle changes can help. But it is better to find somebody to help, even if it's not a professional therapist. Could be somebody to check in with, could be a loved one, a friend. So yeah, on one's own, I think it might be a very difficult thing to live with.
Yeah, I suppose it, in a sense, it could be comparable to like a food addiction, right? Because you have to eat, right? Where,
Yeah.
I mean, all addiction is hard, and support is kind of important for all of it. So I don't want to discount any of that, but just trying to find a comparison that I can relate to.
Yeah. You see, it's. I can give you a little example. When I started trying to rid myself of this pattern of buying multiple things unnecessarily, I would switch to various categories, and I would be like, oh, so I need soap. I need different types of soap, so I have to try them all now. So I would start getting more and more various types of soap, and I would always justify it saying, well, I'm going to use it all. It's soap, right? It doesn't necessarily expire. So, and then I would hoard like a ton of soap. And this is where I realized again that this is not normal. And then, I mean, I do have multiples of most things. Like I have 15 pairs of cat ears. And even though I do use them every day and I enjoy them, I don't need that many.
Actually, I have a direct relation to my t-shirt collection. When I met my partner, she was like, that's too many t-shirts. You don't need that many. And I was like, but they all, I try to wear them all. They're all awesome. But yeah. So I guess in a sense, I kind of have an idea of what that is like, but I never considered it an addiction. Well, not a real like debilitating thing for myself, but I can see where it could be if one is making the decision to buy things instead of doing, paying important bills or whatnot.
Yeah, and having 200 lipsticks is definitely not
a
good thing to do, because it's wasteful too, because I will never be able to use them all up, so I'll end up just throwing them away.
Yeah. So I guess is there anything you'd like to promote on my calendar? You mentioned the reading of Marx, Engels, and Lenin. So I guess, what is it about Marx, Engels, and Lenin, maybe all together, maybe separately, what is it about their writing that you find particularly appealing?
Oh, there are lots of things. First of all, I do agree that it is a bit intimidating to begin reading, especially Marx. And if you start with the Capital, everyone's favorite, you may be, I would probably not recommend starting with the Capital. And there are lots of shorter works that are way more accessible that Marx wrote. One of the ones that I found to be helpful, but this is because I've always enjoyed philosophy, is the Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts of 1844. I'm not very good at remembering numbers, but it is kind of like a raw first draft of the Capital, and it does delve more into the philosophy rather than the economic history. And there are also various versions available. For example, we have a comic of Das Kapital, and I think it was translated from English, and I think it is available to English-speaking folks. We do have it in Russian, and it's a good beginning. And I don't exactly remember the authors, the people who were involved, but from what I've read later after that comic, it's pretty based. So But so accessibility is one thing, but then once you kind of get over some of the maybe more archaic language and some of the concepts, you realize that this is very applicable to what's happening in the world. And it's bizarre and it's eerie when you read, and for me with Lenin, it's a little bit easier because I can read him in his, in the original. So
Right.
nothing is lost in translation. So when you read some of Lenin's analysis of what was happening before the revolution and after the revolution, you are quite astounded at how brilliant his analysis is. It was definitely not perfect, but you can still learn a great deal. So again, it's not as inaccessible as we often believe. And once you get past that initial intimidation, you may find that it's a very practical type of reading. It is not the kind of philosophy where, like Kant, who I can't read for the life of me. It's just so boring to me.
Yeah.
But so I like how Lenin, Marx, and Engels, they are all practical philosophers, so to speak. Everything they're talking about can be applied to real life. And they were trying at various points of their careers to make the writing more accessible to the common folk, so to speak, to the proletariat. Right. So this is why I believe, and also like Engels, I'm sorry, I'll pronounce his name in Russian here, but he did write quite a few very short works, which are often recommended, like the Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, and Principles of Communism. All of these are extremely short reads. They can be done in one sitting, and they're still highly insightful. And Lenin's The State and Revolution is, even by, I think that even I've heard from some conservatives saying that this is a great book. So okay, this is a pretty universal. Yeah, I was really surprised to see that there were quite a few folks who had absolutely no desire to promote communism or to promote the liberation of the working people, and they still found The State and Revolution to be insightful and interesting.
Right. I suppose, yeah. I don't know if there's a writer on the conservative spectrum that I would consider, interesting. Oh, yeah. I'm trying to think of the opposite version, and I just don't think there is one.
Yeah, unless you go into, maybe some really old conservative writing where they didn't even conceive of that yet. But
yeah, maybe. Everybody who writes, at least in the semi-modern age, is kind of like really hackish. So. So you have, for the foes and comrades section, you have a shout out for Our Comrade Support on Reddit. So what is Our Comrade Support?
Yeah, so this is a little community we started in spring, so it's fairly new. So I asked on the subreddit Communism if there was a community dedicated to mental health support, and I was pointed into the direction of this subreddit. It was dead for a while, and we decided to revive it. And so far, the revival has been up and down. We do have a little bit more participation, but I think it is something that is very often overlooked. Most of the people who I've encountered who are even left-leaning seem to have higher levels of distress due to the fact that they see why the world we live in is the way it is. So it is a depressing state of being for all of us, but once we see the whys, we may also experience a lot of anger and frustration and disappointment and bitterness. So I think it's very important not to be alone in these states, because again, they may lead to harm. And I think that even complaining and ranting about what we see in the world has its place. And we don't necessarily want to have this infiltrate, let's say, our study groups. We do want to focus on topics at hand. So I think it's important to have a dedicated space to just vent out our frustrations and to just talk about whatever it is on our mind in an environment where people would understand where we're coming from. And I think we've been moderately successful with unity. And we do have a Discord, which I admit I've never used before, and I feel kind of like an old lady, you know, the things. I'm like, oh, what are all these modern young people things? But yeah, our Discord is active. So yeah, I would like more people to join, and hopefully we can help each other.
That's awesome. Yeah, like I guess I suppose I got my start online in kind of the atheist and skeptical movement. So I was always in arguments and, you know, doing this and that and debating or whatever. And as I've moved farther left, I have less patience for it now. like it was like when the stakes were low, I was able to argue nonstop all day. But now that the stakes are like literally like the welfare of humanity, I have way less patience for people who are on the right or even, you know, liberals or centrists. Like it can be very frustrating and very daunting. So it's great to have a place where people can support each other.
Yeah.
Join us. Yeah, well, I might have to. As far as Discord goes, I have multiple Discord servers that I'm involved in, but I have no idea how to use it. I'm one of the old people that are like, yeah, just like, what's going on there?
Yeah, we've got to play with all the young people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I guess, what kind of content do you think you'll be putting out in the future? Like, is it going to be kind of just the same kind of idea as you're doing now, like poetry and just discussion of various issues, or are you going to go further into theory or?
Yeah, I have quite a few videos pre-filmed for fall, and they are very similar to what I already have put out there. But I do have plans I wish I had more time to do the kind of videos, the more classic BreadTube videos, if you will, right. You know, with the ones that would be a bit heavier on theory. And I did make a few of those videos that I think kind of flew under the radar, and but I do want to keep reading and keep sharing, and whatever happens. So yeah, I don't have any strategic plans, and we'll see how it goes. But I wish I could make longer, more theory-based videos, but I don't think it's going to be possible.
Yeah, like I really admire the people that have the time for that, but I've got kids and I've got, you know, I work a lot, like, so it's I'm amazed that I managed to do what I can do. I'm much better at interviewing anyway. Yeah, so I guess if you had to pick a particular, like, say, piece of theory that you think would be the most accessible to people, which would that be?
Just one.
Well, maybe.
Well, I think if a person is interested in learning about the base, I got cut short when I wanted to recommend the principles of communism. I think it's just a few pages long, and it does give you a review which you can realistically read in like 15 minutes and then get inspired to probably read the Communist Manifesto, which is, I think, the second shortest out of them all. Well, no, the three components of Marxism, three sources and three components of Marxism by Lenin is also extremely short. But I think for a beginner, it may be, Lenin's style is, he's got his own voice, and sometimes he may sound a little agitated and angry to those who are not used to it. Like, he does use certain pejoratives often. So probably starting with the principles of communism and the Communist Manifesto. So I'm going to be very banal here with my recommendation.
That sounds good to me. I've actually read the Communist Manifesto, and I found it very accessible. Like, it was one of because I started off with anarchism. So it was one of the ones where I was veering off into new territory, kind of. So it was I thought it was really good. So I guess, is there anything that we haven't mentioned that you would like to make sure people know about?
Well, I can talk about a lot of things for a long time, but I know
Sure.
It's probably not the best idea right now. So yeah, subscribe to my channel and watch all of my videos where I rant about all of the topics and I blame capitalism. Well, we do have to hold ourselves accountable too. Obviously, not everything is capitalism's fault, but we do have to begin. Yeah, but I just don't want, because we do, when we start personifying capitalism, we kind of make it into this boogeyman, and this is easier for us to then see ourselves as separate, but we are in it, and we are a part of this, whether we choose to or not. And this is why we do have to realize that we all have a role, and it doesn't mean that we have to throw ourselves into a revolution, but it means that we have to at least begin to learn from the history, from its mistakes, and see what it is we can do, because we all have various talents and various situations in life. So it's important to realize that everyone has a role in the movement.
What I guess before we get too close to finishing here, what are your thoughts on the concept of a revolution, and how do you think, like, is this going to be an educational revolution, or is there going to have to be like a kind of I know people talk about a violent revolution, but I'm not entirely sure if I'm on board with that necessarily, but also I'm not necessarily against it. So I don't know quite where I sit. I'm curious where you sit.
Yeah, this is a complex issue, and this is something that a lot of people, whenever you bring up communism, people are like, oh, a bloody revolution. Oh, no, this is... Well, finishing up on the revolution, the Great October Revolution, the act itself only took one life, but the Civil War obviously took millions, and the Civil War was, the imperial forces did come in, supporting the reactionary forces, so it was an invasion, and obviously it was a complete disaster. We did see, as I just recently read, that we did see a huge uprising in the United States last year alone. There were so many protests, and many of them ended up being violent. However, it didn't seem to lead to any kind of centralization of the proletarian forces. So I think that we might have to diversify, and we might have to learn that in the modern world, we will need modern solutions, and we'll probably not be able to have this kind of a one-swipe revolution in a lot of places. So we'll probably have a mix of some violent protests and some strikes, and there are strikes that are ongoing all over the world. Recently, there were strikes, huge strikes in India. There are ongoing strikes in Russia, which we don't hear about, interestingly, but they are beginning to propose political demands as well, not only economic demands, which Lenin said is a great sign, because the proletariat is realizing its role in the history of humankind.
Right.
So they're beginning to demand that the means of production are returned to them. So
that's awesome.
So we'll probably see a huge mix of everything all over the world, and obviously we don't want anyone to be hurt, but it's unfortunately not up to us. We can't just be like, oh, let's just all be friends and dismantle capitalism. I mean, I wish.
Yeah, like I've recently started looking into the idea of a general strike and trying to find organizations that are involved in that kind of organizing in Canada. And I know that in the past there's been general strikes, and you get capital and the police and the government, they like to crack down on that, and they really, like, often they're the ones that are going out and causing the harm first, and then strikers and protesters retaliate, and and then it gets out of hand or whatever. But it's usually, I think that we have, like you say, we have to like organize in various ways, but hopefully not too many people get hurt.
Yeah, that's always the hope and the dream.
So I guess in closing, where can people find your content?
So here on YouTube, my channel is called Peace Labor May, and I'm also on PeerTube, which is a decentralized, federated alternative to YouTube. And I do have a channel of the same name there. My writing can also be found on Write As, which is this weird little website, but it's very clean looking. So a lot of folks have been enjoying that. So yeah,
This
is where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. And it's too bad the internet was kind of messing with us, but I'll work around it.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me, and have a great day.
You too.
Night.
Yeah, that's right. All right. That's all, folks. Thanks for watching and or listening. Remember to share this show with your friends and on the social media site that you use the most. I want to say thank you again to everyone who supports the show on Patreon. It's really appreciated, and it helps me spend more time on this and my other projects when I'm not at work, so that I don't have to work as many gig hours. If you want to contribute, you can do that at patreon.com/skepticalleftist, or you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/skepticallefty. If you can't contribute financially, then a 5-star rating and a review on your podcast app of choice or one of the podcast review sites like Podchaser would be great. If you want to find more from me, then you can check out the show notes or check my Linktree. That's linktr.ee/skepticalcorey. You can find all my social media stuff there, as well as links to my other shows, which include Skeptarchy, which is a panel show I do with some very smart people. From Many People's Strength, which is a show about Saskatchewan politics, and a new project I'm involved in that's called the Atheist, Humanist, Leftist, Revolutionaries with my friend Damien Marie at Hope. My Twitter is @SkepticalLefty, and my Facebook page is The Mind of a Skeptical Leftist. Or you can send me a friend request, which is facebook.com/CJBrainstorm. I accept most friend requests. You can also email me at mindofaskepticalleftist@gmail.com. And if you want to be a guest on the show or know someone I should reach out to, then feel free to let me know. You can book interviews in my available time slots on my Calendly, which you can find on my Linktree. Thanks so much for listening, and let's just all try to be kind to other leftists and to all people, and even if we think they're wrong. The battle that we are fighting is an uphill one and has many obstacles, and we will need all the comrades